Hey people, this is the knot of Atu. It resembles a square knot. It was a symbol that was found in Hatch's Put mortuary temple. It wasn't a real common symbol. You see it in some other places, the knot of Atu. And these Egyptologists, they're not sailors, so they don't quite get what it means. And I can't pronounce the way they want me to pronounce this, but I'm pretty sure they're reading something backwards there. And it most likely says the Hatches Put, and they're getting that PS backwards. And Hatches Put would mean the hatches or the colors put, and put the colors in. It's also common in Celtic and Greek jewelry, and it's where you get to tie the knot comes from. But you see it on this statue here. It's back to the knot of Atu over his knife. It's called a reef knot commonly. Most people call it a square knot, a Hercules knot, double knot, the brotherhood knot, having to do with tying the knot. But sailors, we know this is the knot of Atu. It's not a good knot. The only place you'll use this is when reefing sails or applying a bandage, and this is why it became the symbol of Boy Scouts. But in ancient time, Pliny says that is a belief that wounds heal more quickly when bound with a Hercules knot. And it's said that the knot lays flat, doesn't poke out, so it doesn't injure the wound. But it has more meaning than that. It's the knot of Atu. And in the Greek, they say this means of his death, the knot of Atu. You really ought not have done that. If you do the knot of Atu, you might end up dead. Those are the opposite of the yeses. The Jesus are the yeses. But the knot of Atu, you probably ought not did that. And Kamaraz, the knot of Atu. So if you die doing something stupid, when they come to see your grave, they're going to say, yeah, really ought not have done that. Did something not to Atu. You can see at her grave, they figured out her death was possibly caused by a benzoprine carcinogenic, a skin lotion that was found in the tomb, which led to her having bone cancer. Ooh, really not ought to have done that. If you did something stupid and fell at work, your wounds heal a lot more quickly when bound with a knot of Atu. Boy, I really ought not have done that. You get up limping quick and go back to work feeling like an idiot. If it wasn't your fault, those wounds, they hurt. I done been hit by an oil tanker. It's going to take $10 million before I heal. Don't make me go where I ought not of. And so the reason this is the knot of Atu, if you tie it wrong, if you tie in a thief knot here, you got the working ends on opposite sides, and it'll untie itself. It'll drop your load. And if you tie it proper, when you put a bind on there, it seizes up. You cannot untie that knot. You have to cut it out. So that's where that comes from, You just look at the knot, and somebody that knows just looks at it and says, boy, it ought not have done that. It's the wrong knot. There's many other knots you can use for that purpose that are easily untied. So this information helped me better understand some of this other writings. It helps when you get a good lead into it. So this is one of the symbols of Hercules. And the other symbol is wearing a lion skin. You see Samson and Hercules, they have some of the same symbols, and are most likely one and the same. And so it's also, till death do us part, to tie the knot of Atu. When Thoth, married, his wife was Mot, the truth, in the book of Coming Forth by Day. He says, the four knots are tied about me by the guardians of the sky. And the knot was tied about me by Knew-It. Knew-It when I first saw Matt. It was love at first sight. And Knew-It. I knew it. The knot was Knew-It when I first saw the truth. So just picture the knot two, as a column. You have two columns. On one side you has the yes you ought to, and the other column is the knot of ought to. The things not to do and the things that yes you should. So this line of Poe, from the saga, Strohs. The saga is the long story that Strohs, the Astros you see in there. From the saga Strohs, those comer as the knot of Otov. And so this is a story about the dog, about Anubis, and about cannabis, and everything in Egypt having to do with Anubis, and how to read this when you see it in ancient Egyptian work, and where this word, the officially, come from. And so Anubis embalmed the officials. You see the fish here, and this is a lion, officially on. That's where your word lion come from. You can still almost see the fish in here, and the officially on. But this is in the story of the birth of Samson. You can see here, his role of the chiros, all a full on. And so the hands all a full on. But the chiros, this is also the sign of the Catholic Church. The chiro, they've been in power since the book of Judges, before that. So I believe this is actually the story is about Hercules, and it starts with his dog. A side arrows. The buddies beside you, a side arrows of the Cannabis. Kanabhse, the Cannabis. The Cannabis and two. This ete is usually means in the future, and it's because it backwards is the yet, and here this et is also a yet, is in not yet happened. That's why it's shall, in the future. That's where that comes from. But it's, of the cannabis, or okay. This is where your word okay comes from. And this one they say is not. They got yes and no backwards in the Greek. They say nay is yes and okay is no. But this is okay. And it's explaining cannabis here. It's okay on a base, on a base. Not for everybody and not all the time, but on a base. When you're not at work, when you're over 18, and you got to go to the doctor, Anubis, to get you a script, because it's on a base. It's not legal for everybody. It's regulated. So they're getting this iron razor over here, a side of rose. Sometimes they'll say it's a bar. It just means a side. They're getting that from this word for head down here, which is li. The K-E turns into L-E. And lepales. That's the blade, lepale. So this is Audi hand of view in gastric size. Oughta hand of view of Sue in gastric size. Gastry, is your intestines, and excise is coming out. An excise tax is a tax levied on the moment of manufacture rather than the sale, when it came out the factory. He's talking about his dog fart. Oughta hand of you in gastric size. What it's shoey on, W key, WT, and then ET, and then SHUI, shoey. What it's shoey on. That's why when somebody farts and you fan it away, and you say shooey, the shoe fly, and what it's shoey on, what you try to chase away, and what a hand of you in gastric size, what it's shoey on. And then a side rose. The key just reads as a U, W or a V, USIDH, USIDE, a side. And that's where your word suicide and homicide, sue is you, and the side is the kill part. A side, to kill, rose. And so that's where they're getting this iron razor. And this doesn't mean iron razor. It's probably drawn as a picture of a razor, but the meaning of it, the death rose. And of Canna, Kana, Canna, that's the ancient word for a dog. and and the dog best too, and the cannabis too, and Anubis too, and cannabis too, yeah, your pie, your mouth, your mouth, your fits, your fit is Lee, Ke is Le of phallus. So the phallus is your sword, but it's also your pecker, and the canna and the dog is best to your fit this. Of phallus saw to what in as a rage on to. He saw his phallus as what in as a rage on to. It was all the rage, because he could get it all. The pie this, the mouth this. To the estate, the whole estate, he can get it all. The estate of a pedarian. A pedarian. A lapidarian is somebody who polishes stones, cuts and polishes stones, and so a lapidarian is of pedarian, same as the O pedarian, means the same thing as L pedarian, of pedarian. And of the phallus of to what in as a rage on to, the O estate of pedarian. Of this saga, of the saga, the long story of the saga Stros. Stros is spread out. That's where your word astros come from. They're all strode out. The saga Stros. And of two sorts it too. A Susan to turn it on. Is role of the Sheros. The chair has all a full on. It's the chair has, and it's the share as all a full on. And we'll see more about what that means up above. And you can see here, to deliver Israel from out of the hand of the Philistines, it's all a fool on. There's zero truth to any of that. It's all a fool on, plainly says. The Susan is, it turns. To turn the fashion is roll of the hands all a fool on. That's why you see all them images of Jesus. He always given a hand sign, a gang sign. The Chiros all a fool on. And you can see that he was also a Nazarite. He was a Nazarene. And the Bible don't talk about Nazareth much. It just says that's where Solomon is from and that's where Jesus is from. It doesn't tell you exactly where it is. And it's because it's not a physical place. It's a mental place. And so this Thanet is also, Tanit is the angel. It's a common when you see on gravestones too, the Tanit and the fish. So Tanit changes up. The hands move, has different meanings. The hands move, the head changes size. And you see here, the hand and Tanit and the fish here. This is a symbol of the fish on top. So this is the ancient escort, to the underworld, the afterworld. It's Tanit. And the hands have different meanings. It's drawn many different ways. When you see the hands like this, it means Tanit by chance. The same here. And this is coming from the old Celtic letter chart, meaning by chance. The Tanit of, ought of. And I'm going to put this in this official folder because it's all tied together with that Narmer palette. And I'm going to read a couple lines here and show how it's talking about the dog. And I'm going to hit on a couple more of these words that they use here. The faggies for eating. The faggies pass on. Cater, see on. To cater, to serve it up. A cater, see on. But it's given the qualities of the dog and death and Anubis in here. So, I tell you this TH and D, they interchange. You see that's what they did here. That's how they got this proceeded in pro. But there's only one E there. And that's not proceeded. That's for setting to. you know. And you find country people talk like that. And you setting off to, you know, is proceeding to. We setting off to go bale the hay. But this is for setting to. And he's talking about his setter, his hunting dog. And the setter silently searches for game by scent. And when prey is encountered, the dog becomes motionless. Their name for the distinctive stance. And they were used before guns, and they would net the birds. And the scent was airborne, so they carry their head high. And for setting to it I call, you know, it I oi. Boy, is Ralph for which say to phoner of. You know, and I'm proceeding off to for setting to it I call. And I'm getting this boy, you know, from the VI, you know, is a B in the Hebrew. You know, the B without the dot is the V. And so with the dot is two of them, the Vi. But, you know, Vi is to strive, and it's to joy, to call to joy his rule. And I guess at that time, it was a joy to have sons. And his Ral, and then F, the Ralph for which say. The Ralph for which say. And so this is the word in beginning, you know, in creation, the poe. Always has to do with the poets, where that word comes from, created with the mouth, to create the words. And you see in the book of Acts, the name of the book of Acts in Hebrew is the debris, the same thing, they'll give words. And that's what that means, you know, the word, the for which say, you know, for which who says, for which say, to phoner of, you know, to phoner of. And so the N-E becomes the B or the V, the phoner of, and no peon, and not behind, up ahead, you know. For setting to it I call, boy, is Ralph for which says phoner of, which she calls back. And no peon, and never behind, always in front. And to cure you, and then just evolve, you know, to cure you a pair of Dolan autos. To cure you a pair of Dolan autos. You know, dogs run around, they're always licking the pears. A pear is a little scrape. Dog comes by and wants to lick your pear, lick your scrapes. And people let them do it because they believe that that's a cure. They always believe that. To cure you a pair of Dolan. And so the K-E turns into the L-E, just like the N-E turns into the V-E. So Dolan means wandering. You know, to cure you a pair of Dolan autos, wandering self. You know, the Dolan autos, desperados and wandering autos, the Dolan autos. And curious in the share, y'all, a file on. You know, in the hand of all a file on. You know, they want to come lick all between your fingers, not just sniff, but they're curious in the hand of file on. I'm not so sure that's hand, but what it says is to share, and then why, to share y'all a file on. The tesser a contest. You know, the A-E turns into the E-S. So this is E-S-T-E. A tesser, a contest. And so a tesser is the harvester. And a contest is referring to the death card. You know, the dog shares a file with death. You know, they burying bones out there in the yard or digging them up. You know, death is burying them and the dog's digging them back up. You know, death is the 13 card. And it's also, you see, it's not named here. And so, you know, the tesser is the Greek for the harvester. And the harvester a contest. You know, it's like out there with your weed eater and the dog barking at it. Or your rake. A lot of dogs that chase a rake. You know, the harvester a contest. And you can also see it in this markup here. The second time you read it through, you know, it's the tesser R. and it tells you move the R over, so it's a ARKON, the Archon. That's what that is. That was from the Major Arcana. To share y'all a file on, like a pedophile. That's where philo comes from, the love, and share y'all a file on. It's where they're getting that hand from. The hand and bones, they're both share a love of bones, the tesser and the dog. You can also see here, the force then, THEN, the force then too, as I call. And when you read it through the second time, you move the S over and you really see it then, it's to the forces then too. And as Ralph Fowich say to the phoneron, that's the Phoenicians, the sound it's on. As you can see, it has a mark, somewhere in the middle of each word here. And so it changes this up. And when you see it on the end of the word, it means to read that word backwards and then forwards. And when you see it on the beginning of the word, it means read it forwards and backwards. And so it turns this, it moves the R over, and then it's the carrier of appear a riddle. The carrier of appear a riddle, what to was the Kukarios. The Kuk is the stars, and the Rios is the river. The stars river is the Milky Way. And the carrier appear riddle on what to was the Milky Way in inner ye share, ENIR, the inner YE, inner ye, inner you. And so it's playing on the word, the Kukario, the star as in inner ye, energy, ENIRJE, energy. The star inside of you, the star inner ye, the star energy share. And you can see how the story's changing now, where this mark is, instead of no peon, now it's in on peon. So now it's the one behind you, the carrier of, the KURIR, the in a peon carrier of. And then to fare, FARE. To fare is to present, and turn out. And so now it's got an extra R in there, so it's fair a riddle in not to was, NAUTO and then WOS, in not, the not to was, the skies. And so everybody knew that this to fare a riddle in, to fare the riddle in was in here. But it doesn't come up to the next chapter. Samson's riddle in the next chapter. But this word for riddle here is problem, to a problem. And this is to hyphen of to is, to hyphenate. To hyphen of to is Samson. And that means, to hyphen, a person who is active in more than one occupation or sphere. Supreme hyphenate. She was prepared to carry the heavy load as director, producer, and star of a new film. And so they got hyphen confused with quotation marks, is what's said. But this is in hyphen what to is. And you see most of the names in the Bible like that, they're stacked up. And so Samson carries a big load, and he's a pro-bala de-human. He's not even human. Pro-bala de-human to a problem. We on. So this we on, this is WEAN. And it's not just we on, but the on was the space gods, the gods above. And so when it says, we on like that, that spelling means it's the gods talking, and the problem we on. So I'm going to try not to get so sidetracked and get this second line out of here. But the same as the K, E turns into the L, and the NE turns into the VE. The GE turns into the N. And so it's WEN, when and then EVE, when of it too. And when of it to honor. And so and there was, not and there was, but at that time. And when of it to honor his ex of this fool's. And when of it to honor his ex. He's still talking about his dog, and your ex-wife comes over and he still loves her. And when of it to honor his ex. And R, there is no Z in Zor, it's just a A-R-A-A-R. And of this fool's to would on. And so you see this on the card of the fool, the dog chewing his ass. You always see a dog on the fool card, but on the older ones, he was always chewing a hole in his ass. And on him of two mana. When you're getting on him, not the name, but calling him names. Bad dog. And on him of two mana. Your manners. And mano, that's a man. A hand, a working hand. And that's probably where they're getting that word hand from the share. And it's written like that, so when you come back and read it the second time, this is reading in anum mono, forwards and backwards. Anum mono, what to mono, to have a man to man. But it's, to anum of to from know which. You ought to know which better. Anum of to from know. You ought to have known what to from know. Which ought to stare. And when you getting on him, he just which ought to stare of how kitty cat. The kitty cat. That's where the French get their word etiquette. But men know that we only pretend it's all for the kitty cat. And so the word for guard is the fool at say, A-T-S-A-Y. The fool at say. And do not eat any unclean thing is too much fag upon a catered on. And yet an iron razor shall not ascend is aside a rose of cannabis. Aside to kill the rose of cannabis. And when in the woman is, W-E-L-T-H, the wealth in he got to have the wealth. And of God came to me, is the of wealth the force me. The of wealth the force me. Of God came to me. But I got too far sidetracked in this movie. I'm going to backtrack and go back to the Hebrew and figure out what words sent me this way. And that'll be the next movie. And thank you much, Lucky. I received gorilla cookies. Thank you much.
Don't forget. Hooty hoot, hooty hoot. I won't forget.
Alright, I'm going to cut this off here. Good day.